I am number 3 of 4. I'm the last girl in the family, so I have 2 older sisters and 1 younger brother, and that is a beautiful thing. As the last girl, I got the ability to be spoiled. My name is Reyna, is my nickname actually. My given name is Rogelia, but given that I'm the last girl, people said, oh, the queen of the house is calling, so I got Reyna in Spanish derivative. And I've been Reyna since I was in school at 2 years old because people couldn't pronounce my first name, which was really weird being in Texas, mostly Hispanic, but it happens. So since the 2nd grade, I've gone by Reyna, which is just a name now. It's no longer a title. I wish it was. I wish if I cried, somebody would come running, bring me ice cream, which is always good, or a nice cold Dr. Pepper. I was blessed to be born in the great state of Texas in the late 60s. Yes, I'm old, but that's okay. Just means I have more knowledge, wisdom. Being in Texas, it was constantly warm. I learned that I didn't need air conditioning because a breeze, even a warm breeze, is better than no breeze at all. I was blessed to be able to go out and play in the dark. We had fireflies, and it's something that I would love to share with my kids. The rule was that you had to come home when the lights came on, the street lights, so we were outside a lot. We always had black sweaty feet because we didn't wear shoes. In the summertime, the shoes came off, the shorts went on, and we were outside. We played in the neighborhoods, we played in just everywhere. As long as we were within shouting distance, we were outside. And when the lights came on, everybody got home. I think the first TV we had was still black and white because we didn't watch a lot of television growing up until my mom went back to work. I grew up when my parents were divorced. When I was very young, probably about 2 or 3 years old. So single parent household. My mom taught me how to play baseball and softball. She would hit the ball, we would run the bases and catch the ball kind of thing. So it was a good thing. As a nurse, she worked the night shift. And so we had somebody watching over us in the evening. And then she would get home to take us to school in the morning. And she slept while we were at school, woke up to pick us up from school, and then had dinner together. And then she would go to work. So we had lots of moms, given that most of her friends were nurses, so we were constantly being taken care of. One of the places that we lived, one of the neighbors would watch over us, and she actually taught my oldest sister how to cut hair. She was a teacher at a beauty school. So at a relatively young age, my sister, who's 4 years older than me, she cut our hair, and we learned to be nice, because if she were angry, we got a really short haircut. And it's, as a girl, you don't want a really short haircut. One of the things that I experienced growing up is with a single parent. Sometimes money can be tight. So I remember that we didn't have a lot of extras, but we enjoyed the things that we did. We were outside, we would visit cousins in a different city, and it was just great. One time I remember that my mom had gotten behind on the rent, so we got locked out of our apartment. It's not that bad. In that, we learned that, sometimes you have to give up things in order to pay the bills. So we were able to sneak into the house. We got the television, and my mom pawned the television, and all was well in the world with the rent. Did we miss the television? I don't think we really did. I just remember that we were the spies and that we had to do something to help her. So we got into the house, opened the door, and she took the television, and it was just one of those adventures of being together. It wasn't anything that we thought was a hardship. So, looking back, I look on it fondly and I can laugh about it. It's It's just one of those things that you get to go through. Education was really important growing up. I had the ability to learn really fast. So school was relatively easy for me. I think math was always my favorite subject, so I was able to advance really quickly in math. And sometimes I would do my older sister's homework for their math classes. And I always thought that was fun because I'm 4 years older than my oldest sister, Maria. Yes, very, very Hispanic traditional name. It was fun to know that I could do her things, but I'd never studied it. 4 years difference, I wasn't up to that, but I was able to do it. One of the things that I learned as part of my education is I learned to forge my mother's signature, because at times if she were asleep during the daytime or I didn't have an opportunity to talk to her about things I wanted to do in school, I would just sign her name for her. And then later on come back home and say, hey, look, this is what I want at the math field trip or at the science fair, because I always needed signatures so that we could travel school to school. So she was very surprised, and because she was asleep during the day, she wouldn't remember everything she signed. So I was able to do a lot more because I was a little bit more sneaky. But one of the things she instilled is a love of reading. We read constantly. I remember reading Scarlet Letter and Wuthering Heights probably when I was 9 or 10. Not everybody reads it, but I enjoyed it. So reading is one of those things of education that you just had to constantly fill your mind so that you could go on great adventures without actually leaving your home. And that's something that I've tried to instill in my kids so that they know that, hey, we're going to go on a car ride. It's going to be a long distance. Let's read a book. Let's go on an adventure. Even now, part of my adventure is, I'm weird. I will do algebra problems that I find on different websites. I have old chemistry books that I still work through the problems just to make sure that I'm keeping my brain active. I also taught myself how to crochet and how to knit so that I could keep my hands nimble and my brain nimble. Chemistry was always my favorite subject. I hate biology. But I can work through chemistry problems. I can understand how things were put together chemically. Education is one of those things that you choose to do yourself. It's not something that someone's going to give you. You have to seek it at every opportunity. If you can't see life as an educational moment, then you could be a very unhappy person. So I choose to look at experiences as things that I can learn from so that I don't repeat something if it's bad, or so that I can repeat it if it's good. It's my outlook on life that education is something that everybody should seek on their own. It's not up to any individual or institution to give you an education. That's something you give yourself. It's your ability to grow and to learn outside of the classroom. I am the family historian. So that being said, I have the job of making sure that I keep up to date with all the cousins on both sides of the family. And I keep a family tree, and I try to keep everybody's birthdays straight, all of that wonderful stuff. So on my mom's side of the family, she is one of 14 children, and both my grandparents had 2 marriages. So there was lots of children. She grew up in a very busy household. And I've been able to keep track of most of my aunts and uncles, a few of my cousins. Facebook is a great thing to keep in touch with everyone. On my dad's side, after the divorce, we didn't get to see that side of the family very much. But because of the great new technology, I've been able to get reacquainted with my cousins and actually started to find more information about the Robles side, which is my maiden name, my dad's name. And I never had any pictures of my father's family except for the ones that we took when we were on vacation with him. I knew my grandmother, Margarita, and she was probably 4'10", 4'11", and her sister was probably about the same height, so they were very small. But I never had the opportunity to meet my grandfather. He died when my dad was 10. So in doing all the research and trying to find out more information, I actually found his border crossing record when he came into the United States. And it was the very first time I'd ever seen a picture of him. So on those border crossing records, sometimes they have pictures. And so it was the very first time I'd ever seen him. And when I shared that information with my cousins, they were like, yeah, that's our grandpa. And so they were able to talk to their parents, and we finally got a picture. We got a picture of my grandfather with his big brimmed hat and this big mustache. And so it reminded me a lot of my dad, because growing up, my dad always had a mustache. So in seeing his picture, I started to see the genetics that we all got passed down. So off a whim, I found a mustache and I put it on and I took a picture. And then I put the two pictures together and I look like my grandfather. That's something every girl wants to say, is I look like my grandfather. Not my grandmother, but my grandfather. So I learned that genetics is a wonderful thing. And hearing his story and the story of what was happening during that time period, he was born in 1899. And so I got to see a different world, not just the US, but Mexico. So with him, I don't think of him necessarily as my grandfather, because that's more of the American side. That's my mom's side of the family. I think of him as my abuelito and my abuelita. And we were able to tell the difference of who we were talking about based on what name we used. And so even now with my children, they will say, you know, it's my Theo Andrew, meaning my brother from my side of the family, versus my Uncle Nate, who is on my husband's side of the family. It's just a different feeling. It's just something that happened when we tried to blend two cultures together. In family history, we were able to determine that on my dad's side, most of his lineage comes from Spain, but I haven't found the connection where we jumped the pond. On my mom's side, my grandmother is part of a family that was in Texas as part of the original Spanish land grants back in the early 1700s. On my grandfather's side, maternal grandfather's side, he was from the great state of Durango. So there's so much history going back and forth and trying to make connections. And I'm just so thankful that there are people out there that are making these records available so that we can find more. Teaching my children that they have two cultures to draw from, that they have strength from both sides, is something that brings joy. They can say, well, you know, I have the Irish ancestors and I have my Mexican ancestors. Both worked very hard to succeed in their lands, in their areas. And so they can go back and say, you know, because they were strong, I can be strong and I can overcome whatever else is coming my way. And I can be happy because somebody else has already done this. Growing up, we got to visit my dad's side of the family probably once every 3 or 4 years, where my dad would take us for the summer during school break and we would go visit. Part of that, we got to spend time with my grandmother. And so being that we spent most of our time in the English world going to school, we didn't speak Spanish as well as we should have, but we tried. And my grandmother didn't speak a lot of English, but one thing that she was very passionate about was sharing her knowledge of the gospel. So one of the things that she taught us every time we would go visit is that it was important to go to church. And so we always knew that we always had to take a dress when we went on vacation with my father, because Grandma was going to take us to church. And when she took us to church, it was all in Spanish. But one of the things that I remember from those experiences that remind me of family history is we learned a song that, it's the only chorus that I remember is Más allá, mi nombre escrito está. More over there, my name is written. So as I started with family history and getting the names together, it reminded me of that song. That it was a song that I remembered from childhood. And now I can share that name, my grandparents, my great-grandparents. I can share the information with my children because their names are written down. Because someone is remembering them and they're written in a book. The book of life, if you want to say that. But they're written so that the rest of our family, they know where they come from. And they know where they can go because people have done some of the work. This song, Más allá, mi nombre escrito está, is just something that we remembered since childhood. And it's something that my sisters and I look back on and think, man, of all the things, this is the one song that we can't get out of our head. But we know that it means something. That it's more than just a song. It's a remembrance. And so, yes, family history is important. And I learned it years ago before I knew anything about doing research about family history. So their names are written. Their names are recorded. And their names will continue. And they will still live in the memories of my family and in the books that are written about them. So I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I joined when I was 19, almost 20 years old. I joined the church. My oldest sister joined first. She was baptized 2 weeks before I was. It's a really funny story, but I'll share that later when I talk about that portion. 18 months after I joined the church, I went on a mission. So not very knowledgeable about all the doctrinal stuff. I knew I had a testimony of the truthfulness of the church that I had joined. So I went to Oakland, California to serve a mission for 18 months. I went Spanish speaking. I'd learned to speak Spanish. Yay! So when I arrived in Oakland, I was considered the native speaking sister. So I had all American companions who were just learning Spanish. And it was difficult because I just grew up speaking English because I went to school. I spoke Spanish when I talked to my friends' mothers and fathers. And I was learning the gospel in Spanish. My very first companion was Sister Chase from Orem, Utah. She was an avid athlete, so every morning she'd get up at the crack of dawn and she would climb stairs on a chair in the apartment, in the studio. So we would hear her stomping up and down. I learned really fast to work with other people, to share what I might be frustrated about and what they might be frustrated about. I was also one of the less serious personalities. I find joy in the little things of life, and I would share that with other people. I learned that on my mission, I can do all sorts of accents in Spanish when I'm speaking Spanish. For the life of me, I can only do one in English. But it was fun meeting people in Oakland. We got the gamut. We had a lot of people that were refugees from Central American countries. We had the opportunity to speak to people who were political refugees from the country of Nicaragua. It was something hard, but at the same time, it was something that we were able to share together and experience. One of the companions that I did have was Sister Bean. I got to spend the longest time with her, and she was from Arizona, and here I am from Texas and Illinois, where I spent my high school years. And it was very different. We had the opportunity to really work together and to work with each other's strengths. Where I may not have had the best gospel knowledge, Sister Bean did. Where she may have been, a little stressed about, how we were doing things, I was able to show her, hey, we're making progress. It's okay. The gospel is fun. The gospel is something that should bring you joy in each day. So we were able to work together really well. One of the things that we were able to accomplish on our mission is that in one of the areas that we served in Fremont, California, we didn't have a Spanish ward or Spanish branch. What we had was a group. And in this group, we had to translate Sunday services in sacrament, which meant way back in the early 90s, translation was not a mic that you could just simply talk into and everybody else had their earphones. No, it was a muzzle that went right over your mouth and you got to talk into it. So me being the native sister, I had the opportunity to do a lot of translations. It was a very difficult job because I'd never done it before, as well as I was able to learn how to communicate ideas from one language to another. It was more interpreting than it was translating. At the same time, the church came out with a hymnal that matched the English hymnals. So we were able to share the gospel through hymns because now they matched. The tunes matched, the words, everything was great. And we were able to see just the light of the world just turn on in these members because they had never really heard the gospel songs in Spanish. So while we were waiting, we may walk into sacrament, we would quickly look up the songs and point them out of where they could find them and they could hear them for the first time. So one of my favorite hymns in Spanish is Humbly Meekly Now. It's just a song that was always in the Spanish hymnal, but when it was translated, it was just something that could connect to a person. So with this group in this area, I get to spend 9 months, and we were able to move from a group to a branch. And we had our first sacrament meeting in the Relief Society room. There were 12 of us there. There were 8 priesthood holders, and there were 4 women, 12, plus the missionaries. So it was something that brought tears to everybody's eyes, tears of joy, but we did it. And currently in that area, I think there are 4 or 5 branches in the Fremont, Warm Springs area. So I look at that and think, wow, I remember having discussions with the stake president about when our next meeting was going to be because we really needed to get this branch going. And my stake president at the time that organized this branch was very good friends with my stake president at home. So when I got home to report on my mission, one of the things he asked me about was, how did it go talking to leadership about starting something new? And I didn't know until after our discussion that he was very good friends with our stake president in California. So he already knew the story before I even got home. And I hope it was something that he felt good about, that I was able to help a language develop in the church. I remember that we would do culture classes with the English words at the time to let them know that it's okay to talk to these people. They may not share the same language, but they share the same feeling and the same gospel. So we would teach the English word, how to say hello, how are you in Spanish, and we taught the Spanish branch the same thing. So they were able to communicate together, and we were involved together so that everybody was growing in the gospel together. Languages shouldn't cause barriers. Languages should bring diversity into an area. It should be a thing to educate each other on the different cultures and the different mindsets, but it should never be a barrier to stop anyone from progressing in the gospel. So, missions. I already talked about that, but one thing about my mission is how I met my husband. Yes. Everybody's looking and thinking, oh, what's she going to say? She met him on her mission. Yes, I met my husband on my mission. My husband is 3 years younger than I am. It just happened to be that one of his companions that had been in one of my previous areas knew that I was a Spanish-speaking missionary, and they had tracked it into a Spanish-speaking family, so they introduced us to the family. I didn't think very much of my husband at the time. It was the first time I'd met him, and that was it. That was the only interaction was, hey, here's a family, you should talk to them. We talked, they left, all was good. We continued to share the gospel with this particular family. I don't remember what happened, but it's been 25 years, so forgive me. Anyway, that was the one time that I met Chad. Moved forward 7 months, my last month, I had the opportunity to go to Concord, California. Yes, Concord, California. And my mission companion at the time was Sister Karen Snow. And she was very energetic, I want to get things done. And that was great. We also had a brand new missionary that we were training. And we were in a district with no other sisters. It was just the Spanish-speaking sisters. And then I think there were 4 English elders or 4 companionships. My husband ended up being our district leader at the time. I don't remember very much about his leadership skills. I was preparing to go home. I had this brand new missionary. And so it was just one of those things that, yeah, hey, nice to meet you. He made a chocolate cake from scratch, which to me is just a beautiful thing because I don't cook. And I thought, wow, he's a really nice guy. I'll probably never see him again. I'm going home to Chicago. Have a great life. So I left. And one of the things that happened was my companion that I left behind, she got to stay in the same area with him for a very long time, got to know him. And she found out that he's a Dallas Cowboy fan. Yay, Cowboys! Yes, I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan too. And he had been Dear John'd. And she said, hey, this elder just really needs help. He also had fallen and broken his collarbone. He was just really depressed from what I was told. Just write him a letter just to be nice. Okay, so I wrote him a letter just to be nice. And it ended up that we wrote for the last 6 months of his mission. I had already been home 1.5 years by the time he got home. During that time, I moved to Utah not knowing he was from Utah. And he got home in June. We went out on our first date 4 days after he got home. We were engaged Labor Day, married the week before Thanksgiving. So it just happened to work out that way. We didn't have a mission romance. We didn't really think about each other. What we did know is that we were great friends. In writing letters back and forth, we really developed a friendship rather than a romance. So it was his mind that I learned to love first. And then the rest came afterwards. So, I think about the experiences that I had. If it hadn't been for my mission, I would never have met my husband. I wouldn't have 5 beautiful children. or they wouldn't be the same children. My life would be completely different. So just having gone on a mission changed everything. As a mission experience, I would recommend it to everybody. I think it's a way to grow away from home and grow in the knowledge of who you are. One of the things that I have learned being in Utah, because I haven't experienced the gospel very much outside of Utah, I've learned that very few young people know who they are and that they are comfortable with who they are. There is this stigma that you have to be perfect. As I think about my experiences growing up, in that I grew up with a single parent, I grew up as a minority, I think about the things that were instilled in me. And I think about that I know who I am and I make no excuses for it. And people who know me will probably say, yeah, there's no excuse for Reyna. And I am who I am, and that's all that I am. But I'm willing to learn and to grow with experiences and knowledge. And I don't make excuses for not being perfect. I will never be perfect in this life. And that's one thing that I have learned over time and that I've tried to instill in my children. Hey, I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking you to do your best. And so they've grown up with the idea that as long as they're doing their best and they're better than they were yesterday, all is well in the world. So as my experience with younger people here, I've noticed that very few people know who they are. I've noticed that there are a lot of young women who think, if I just wore the right dress, if I just had the right shoes, or if I just looked like my neighbor who is blonde and blue-eyed, if I just wore enough makeup when I started high school, I would be accepted. And I think that goes back to not knowing who you are, not accepting who you are. I think it's very important to recognize your own strengths and your own abilities. You don't have to be like everybody else. Not everybody gets to sing in the choir. Not everybody gets to play in the band. Not everybody is going to be a cheerleader. Sometimes we need people in the audience to cheer us on, and that's okay. Sometimes somebody needs to learn compassion. Sometimes somebody needs to learn how to cook. I still haven't, but I'm trying. But learning who you are and accepting that person with all its strengths and weaknesses makes you very special. You don't have to look like everybody else. You don't have to act like everybody else. You just have to be you and the best you can be. Perfection is not required. Perfection is what we're working towards. We just need to be better today than we were yesterday. We need to go forward knowing that we can make changes in our lives to be better, to learn more. And never stop learning. Never just say, hey, I can watch television instead of reading a book. Read a book. Spend 15 minutes less on that video game. Read a book. Talk to your mom. Talk to your dad. Talk to your grandparents. Find it, the wealth of knowledge that they have, their experiences that they get to share with you. We don't want that to get lost. One of the things that I'd like to share with you, because my son has asked me, is my testimony and my story. So as I stated before, I was baptized about 2 weeks after my oldest sister. My oldest sister met the missionaries because her mother-in-law thought they were pot salesmen. They were selling pots door to door. She invited them over. And so first it was her mother-in-law and then her husband, and then she was baptized. One of the things that, just a little background, is that we grew up in a very agnostic home. We were Christians. My mom sent us to every church that would come to the house and pick us up. So It was one of those things that we knew our Bible. We knew what was good, what was bad. We knew the 10 Commandments. We knew the stories of Joseph and Jonah and the whale. And it was just something that we had shared as a family. And I remember Mr. Rubin driving around in his bus. And if you went to church, he'd give you a giant sized candy bar when you got off the bus to go home. There were times that I would go without anybody else. And when I got off the bus, I got the, where were you? We didn't know where you were. How come you didn't tell me you were going? And because I was the only one on the bus. So I always knew the gospel. I always knew, hey, I had friends that were Catholic. I had friends that were Jehovah's Witness. I had friends of all persuasions of religions. And so I was able to speak to them and to learn about whatever they were into. But my mom never pushed religion as far as you need to be baptized in this one or you need to be baptized in that one. It could be that I was baptized in the Catholic Church when I was a child, but I don't remember. So it was just one of those things that religion was something that we had to learn. So we went to church. So again, I knew what I wanted out of life, what I didn't. And everyone is born with the light of Christ. So everybody can be inspired. Everybody knows good and bad. So with that being said, when my sister was baptized, I was given a Book of Mormon at her baptism I was in a corner with 3 different missionaries around me. There was no escaping them. And so I read the Book of Mormon. And because I was such an avid reader and still am an avid reader, I thought, okay, it's a Book of Mormon. It's a book. It's about that thick. I can read it in a couple of days. But I didn't. It actually took me a couple of weeks to read the Book of Mormon because I would stop and I would ask questions and I would call the missionaries, explain to me what happened here. Explain to me what happened there. And it was something that I was looking for that I didn't know about. I've always known that Christ is my Savior. I've always known who I am. I'm a child of God. And I know I'm special because God doesn't make junk. So for me, it was meeting my needs in the things that I was learning because I already had a foundation. I didn't have to go and search for something new because it was something that was real and I just had to find it. So I was baptized 2 weeks before my 20th birthday. It's not a 2x4 story. I didn't have angels singing in the background when I found the gospel. It was something that was just right. So here I am. More than half my life I have spent as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Not very many people can say that. But everybody can have a conversion. Everybody can gain a testimony. And the most important testimony is that you are a child of God. And Christ is your Savior. And has suffered everything for you. So there's no reason to be glum. Even though there's hardship all around us. Because He's already taken that. And as we choose to live, and we remember that He's gone through everything, and He has overcome, we can live a happier life. We can find joy in even the smallest of things. And in those moments of heartache and the lowest of low of feelings, He's there. And He's lifting us up. And He's saying, go on. I've already done this. I've done the hard part. Now you just need to heal and go on. So yes, I know that Christ is my Savior. And I know that He has put me here to learn and to grow. to be the best that I can, and to be an instrument in His hands to help other people. That's what my mission in life is. I may not be able to hand food to every single person. I may not be the person to go to if you need cooking lessons. I'm really not that person. But I can be that person that will give you a smile. I can be that person who will do a happy dance for you on the days that you need it. And that's all that may be the only thing somebody needs to make it through the day. So at my age, I've never been this age before, 48. I probably don't act like most 48-year-olds, almost 50. And that's okay. Because I'm not here to please anybody but my Savior. And I knew that one day I will make a difference. So my name is Reyna Robles Killian. I am 48 years old. I'm originally from the great state of Texas. I spent high school in Chicago, Illinois. I just want you to know that I'm not perfect and that I find joy in little things. And I am happy from the inside out. And nobody can take that away from me. And I wish that you will find the happiness inside that will spread out to those around you so that they're happy. And I wish that you will find the truth in your life so that you can be an instrument in our Heavenly Father's hands. And I wish this with my whole heart for you, whoever you are that gets to watch this video. Enjoy and have a great life.